U.S. Lit, Day 6, Part 1. David Foster Wallace, Life and Work, Commencement Address. I'm going to do this in 3 parts, so bear with me as I read through this. Please follow along. There are these 2 young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the 2 young fish swim on for a bit, and eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell's water?" If at this moment you're worried that I plan to present myself here as the wise old fish explaining what water is to you younger fish, please don't be. I'm not the wise old fish. The immediate point of the fish story is that the most obvious, ubiquitous, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. Stated as an English sentence, of course, this is just a banal platitude. But the fact is, in the day-to-day trenches of adult existence, banal platitudes can have a life or death importance. They might sound like hyperbole or abstract nonsense. A huge percentage of the stuff I tend to be automatically certain of is, it turns out, totally wrong and deluded. Here's one example of the utter wrongness of something I tend to be automatically certain of. Everything in my own immediate experience supports my deep belief that I am the absolute center of the universe, the realest, most vivid, important person in existence. We rarely talk about this sort of natural, basic self-centeredness because it's so socially repulsive, but it's pretty much the same for all of us deep down. It's our default setting, hardwired into our boards at birth. Think about it. There is no experience you've had that you were not at the absolute center of. The world as you experience it is right there in front of you, or behind you, or to the left or right of you, or on your TV or your monitor or whatever. Other people's thoughts and feelings have to be communicated to you somehow, but your own are so immediate, urgent, real. You get the idea. But please don't worry that I'm getting ready to preach to you about compassion or other directness or the so-called virtues. This is not a matter of virtue. It's a matter of choosing to do the work of somehow altering or getting free of my natural, hardwired default setting, which is to be deeply and literally self-centered, and to see and interpret everything through this lens of self. People who can adjust their natural default setting this way are often described as being well-adjusted, which, I suggest to you, is not an accidental term. Given the triumphal academic setting here, an obvious question is how much of this work of adjusting our default setting involves actual knowledge or intellect. This question gets tricky. Probably the most dangerous thing about college education, at least in my own case, is that it enables my tendency to over-intellectualize stuff, to get lost in abstract arguments inside my head, instead of simply paying attention to what's going on right in front of me, paying attention to what's going on inside of me. As I'm sure you guys know by now, it's extremely difficult to stay alert and attentive instead of getting hypnotized by the constant monologue inside your own head. 20 years after my own graduation, I've come gradually to understand that the liberal arts cliché about teaching you how to think is actually shorthand for a much deeper, more serious idea. Learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to, and to choose how you construct meaning from experience. Because if you cannot exercise this kind of choice in adult life, you'll be totally hosed. Think of the old cliché about the mind being an excellent servant but a terrible master. This, like many clichés, so lame and unexciting on the surface, actually expresses a great and terrible truth. It is not the least bit coincidental that adults who commit suicide with firearms almost always shoot themselves in the head. And the truth is that most of these suicides are actually dead long before they pull the trigger. And I submit to you that this is what the real, noble value of your liberal arts education is supposed to be about. How to keep from going through your comfortable, prosperous, respectable adult life dead, unconscious, a slave to your head and to your natural default setting of being uniquely, completely, imperially alone, day in and day out. That might sound like hyperbole or abstract nonsense, so let's get concrete. The plain fact is that you graduating seniors do not yet have any clue what day in, day out really means. There happens to be whole large parts of adult American life that nobody talks about in commencement speeches. One such part involves boredom, routine, and petty frustration. The parents and the older folks here will know all too well what I'm talking about. The really important kind of freedom involves attention.